What up, people? Welcome to the Doing Everything Different podcast. I'm your host, Devin Lars. And today, really excited to sit down and have a conversation with Donny Brock, who is a visual artist, art director, and design manager for the Seattle Seahawks. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Same here. So I've been following you. I saw you first on LinkedIn and saw some of your content that you've been posting. It looks like you have been doing some really, really dope projects in kind of the sports world. And so I was like really fascinated to have a conversation with you and talk about your journey and kind of how you got there and how this whole thing kind of developed. So what is one thing that you would say that has been interesting or you learned in your journey so far?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing that I'm like really dialing in on right now is like authenticity. Like throughout my career, I've been in a lot of different spaces, especially being in Texas. I've worked in oil and gas. I've worked in agency environments. I've worked in like sports environments. And I think as a Black woman and just as a Black person in general, we have like this really cool capacity to kind of shape shift in a way, code switch. And I think as much as that is a superpower, I think like my bigger superpower is just being able to show up authentically as I am, not just in like the spaces that I occupy, but also in the way that I create, and bringing forth like what really honors like my experience and who I am, and not shying away from that for the sake of like pleasing others or the concept of being a certain type of person. Like I just want to be myself.
I love that. I didn't even know that from a background of your experience. You've had a lot of experience in different industries and stuff like that. I saw you work with the Texans and some other sports teams and stuff like that. So how did this start? Where did your career start? Did it start from an agency side or where did that first begin?
So my career started actually with the Houston Rockets. I was a graphic design intern. And I jokingly like applied to that, like just randomly one day. And I was like, there's no way they're going to like hire me for this. It would be crazy. But they did. And it was like a game-changing thing that happened for me. And I really am thankful to Jose Lopez, Will Tillis, and Kim Rogers. I always say like to my team, I'm like, the way I was raised, and I'm talking about when I was at the Rockets, I was like, they raised me to be like this.
I love that. Were you always into sports? Was that like a goal of yours to work in the sports industry?
It wasn't actually. Design actually came up in my life from my love of music and just like being really interested in like the visuals that accompany like my favorite songs because I love music. And I remember like going into like all of the local and like downtown record stores and just feeling like I was in this like museum of art. And I started actually doing like cover art and like remaking things for my favorite albums, especially like Black albums. So that's actually what my intention was like, I just want to make a cover for Drake. Like, just give me one chance. Like I could flip that. But yeah, and then sports, I think what I am most passionate about when it comes to sports is more so like the culture around sports. And I feel like when you work with a team, like you are contributing to the culture of this community that you exist in. Like the Rockets and like the Texans and the Seahawks are like pivotal parts of the culture of those cities and like also the culture of like Black and brown people. So I think that's why it was so aligned for me to go in that direction.
That's dope to have all the experience with those different teams too, because what I've noticed, we do a lot of work with the Warriors and a couple other different NBA teams. And we were looking at, opportunities to work with the NFL and NFL teams. And it's a very different world in terms of how culturally, internally, how they operate and stuff like that. What have you what were the little things that you've taken from working in the sports industries and kind of seeing how different organizations kind of come together and, you know, culturally, whether that's internal that you liked about it, or just even from just cool experiences that you took from it?
I would say like honestly, from one thing I didn't know is that like whether it's the NBA or the NFL, like every team is like different. You know, like they have their own way of how they kind of handle things as an organization. So I would say that's a hard one. Wait, ask me that one more time.
So, okay, so let me ask you this. Let me,
Right.
how about we do it? How about, so as you said that, right? Everybody has their own culture from a team standpoint. From a design element, how do you kind of think about approaching design when you think about these different teams? Because you're right, they do all have these cultures, these different like looks and takes and what they're interested in. Do you find yourself when you're designing, like, you know, just going to the games and consuming yourself in that, or like how do you kind of get inspired to figure out what that culture is like?
I would say just like being in the city and also recognizing our players as more than just athletes, but as like people. Um, like we have like Kenneth Walker is like super into anime. And so like you get to bring some of that visual style to it because it's like we want to like honor their individuality.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when I was at the Rockets, like James Harden and like his beard, and just like the whole like there's like it almost felt like there's a culture around like his style.
Yeah.
And so I think those are some of the things that I take in like visually, and then just like from the city, obviously like Houston has some really cool and interesting like roots and culture that's so different from any other city in the US. Like chopped and screwed and
Mm-hmm.
you know, like just like zero and like spinners on your like it's just a whole thing. And so like I again I think like when I think about my culture of like being a Houstonian when I was there was like I tried to find ways to bring that in, you know, and hone in on it.
Love that. Yeah, finding those elements to get inspired, I think is for sure important, and understanding those different cultures because it is so different, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking about even just the culture of um, the Bay Area and the Warriors and working with different teams in these different cities. It's really interesting to see how they operate, the words that they use, the kind of cultural icons that you have, like, you know, chopped and screwed in Houston, and you have that whole kind of movement. So that's super dope. I love it.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely I can't even lie. Like I'm still trying to figure out like PNW culture because I'm, you know, I've only been here about it'll be 2 years next actually this month. That's crazy. Um, but yeah, like Houston culture is so different from the Pacific Northwest. Like it's like night and day. So that's something that I've like been actively trying to learn. You know, going on hikes and you know learning what the bodies of water are called, like the sound and things like that. So it definitely requires like being present where you are and like in taking in the environment. You know, the sonics and that whole.
I love it. Did you go to school for design?
I actually didn't. I did
Okay.
not. I took like my basics, and then I got the internship around the same time that I was finishing up my basics. Um, and then right after that, I went back to like the oil and gas company that I was working at and kind of created a role for myself there and was like, hey, like, let me do marketing and design here because that's what I want to do. And then the Texans actually reached out to me to freelance, and there was just no way I could do school and freelance and this oil and gas job. And so my mom kind of was like, hey, you know, I'll support you if you want to go to school and we'll, you know, back you up, but you're not going to be able to do all this. So you need to make a decision. And so I was like, I'm just going to get into my career. Like, I don't want to wait, you know, to graduate and then try to apply to the same kind of role. So, yeah, I just say that I was drafted early.
I love that. No, I think that's important for people, right? Because I didn't go to college either, right? I went straight into my business and kind of out of high school. And I think that there's for so much, and just even where the world is shifting, you look at a lot of these big companies, they're not requiring degrees and they're not requiring all of this stuff. So to be able to get that real world experience, especially when you have opportunity, I think it's important to be able to jump in. So that's really cool that you were able to do all of this in such a short amount of time, without having that quote unquote traditional background of having to go, to school. And I think even especially with design and creative stuff, it's kind of one of those things where you kind of have it or you don't. And it's like, it's hard to teach. And it's like, if you really have this creative idea, the stuff that you're going to get in the real world workforce and like actually out there experiencing stuff is going to be stuff that you are going to learn on the fly. Cause I'm assuming in these different organizations, you treated those like essentially like school, right? The stuff that you learn from the Texas, Houston Texans and all that stuff you carry over.
Yeah. That's why I say like the Rockets, like they raised me because
That's dope.
they really taught me like how to be a good designer. And I will say that there was like a very small portion of my career that imposter syndrome came up, because I started working with people who had their degree, who had finished a 4-year program, who had done the studio art classes and tried all of the different things. And I kind of just like shot straight in. But now I kind of like, I don't shy away from telling people that I didn't go to school. I feel like it speaks more to like my like creative resilience and my passion for like what I do. Um, and I'm like honestly really proud of it because I've been able to accomplish like so much in such a short amount of time. I always tell people like I made this like insane 5-year plan. It's insane because of the fact that I made a plan, but the plan was reasonable. But I made this 5-year plan. I was like, I want to do this by this age, this by this age, this by this age. And like God was like, nah, we're about to do all of that, and we're shortening that to about 2 years. So by the time I was like 20, I want to say 22, turning 23, I was already an art director at an agency. And when I came to Seattle to work for the Seahawks, I was 24 with like a manager role. So I just feel like you can literally do anything. And I feel like honestly, not having gone to school, the benefit of that was that like, I don't know, it was like there's like this expansiveness around the way I create art, and no one's like created rules for me, So I don't have rules for myself.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
No, that's impressive. That is definitely something to be proud of. So something you said about the imposter syndrome, right? This is a common thing that comes up a lot on this podcast and this show, and it's something that everybody deals with. How did you navigate that by being so young and not having the degree and like you said, working alongside of the people that did? What was the inner conversation that you had to keep moving forward? Because a lot of people, will let that affect them and feel like they don't belong in that space.
Mm-hmm. I would say a few things. One of them is like understanding that in order to be powerful and good at anything, like you have to be willing to fail and be horrible. Like that was like, and it's kind of like radical, especially for I think a lot of the people that I know around me, especially creatives, like we have this like obsession with control, control of perception of like our art, how we're perceived in like certain spaces. But you have to like release that in order to grow. So one of them was like, despite I never call myself fearless, like I had that fear and that anxiousness, and that like just like doubt around what I was capable of, but I did it anyway. But I was just like, this might be really bad, but I'm gonna learn from it, and like that's the win. And then the second thing I would say is like vulnerability, which is another tough one. It's crazy because I'm like, for me, I've like practiced this for so long. So now it's like very easy for me to do, but it took practice, like the vulnerability to say, like, actually, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can get back to you with one. And not, I think, especially like for Black women, like we feel like we have to be strong, or have to show up and like have our game face on. But like the vulnerability to feel like if the space, like a lot's for it, because obviously like safety and stuff like that, but just being able to find an ally somewhere to say like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and know that
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Because honestly, the further I've gotten in my career, the more I've learned that a lot of people are just winging it. Like,
Most people.
yes, that everybody's just like trying to see what's gonna happen, like, and just, but the difference between the people that do and the people that don't are the people that are willing to fail in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been actually doing a lot of work around failure recently, and just kind of reframing it as an attempt. Because when you make an attempt at anything, like if I have a friend, she does like archery, if you miss the bullseye and you're in archery, are you going to be like, well,
Yeah.
that's it? Like, no, you pull out another arrow and you do it again and you adjust your aim and you clear your focus, you look at your form. So anyways, yeah.
No, I love that. I was talking to one of our episodes. I talked to a friend, Brian Madden, who's a designer and creative and artist, and he did a project for. We just posted it. He did a project for like Travis Scott, and he did this thing out of marble.
Ooh.
Long story short, the event got canceled. He didn't get it, and the piece cracked and broke. But he took a picture of it and posted it on his social media page, and then it got picked up in an article, and then it led to him doing the 99 awards for Madden.
Wow.
And he was just talking about how it's just what you look at those, like you said, those failures, and you think that it's a failure. Oftentimes, those lead to new opportunities, and I'm starting to really understand that more and more. Is like you said, those failures aren't failures; it's learning lessons.
Yeah, and it's so cliche and it's annoying because, like, people are
Yeah,
telling you like, what did you learn? And it's like, I don't want to learn anymore. I
I
just
just
want
want
to.
it to work.
I'm just trying. Yeah, I'm trying to catch these dubs, and I want to have some stuff to, to talk about on the LinkedIn's and the stuff. But I think like the other thing that's also great about that is like when we can celebrate our missteps as much as we celebrate our wins, like we're actually
Mm,
freeing other people of imposter syndrome. Like that's what
mm-hmm,
I've learned about the vulnerability piece is that like as I heal myself, I am healing others also, because then they can
mm-hmm,
see, because I think a lot of the root of imposter syndrome is really this like story and this narrative that everyone except for me understands what's going on right now.
mm-hmm.
So once people can start to admit and say like, yeah, I really goofed on this, or this project was unsuccessful, but I'm able to pinpoint why and I'm going to pivot, that lets someone else see like, oh, she does all these things and but she messed up a project, and it's like, yes, like we all are going to
Yeah,
make mistakes. We're not, perfect, and I wouldn't want to be. I don't think that makes good art.
no, it doesn't. What you said too about the vulnerability, right? I think a lot of people think that that's weakness when in reality that's really strength when you can come, because everybody sucks at something, right?
Mhm.
Like everybody, especially when they're just getting started, and like you said, majority of people are just winging it, right? Nobody knows what we're doing, we're just trying to figure it out as we go. And I think vulnerability and being able to admit and be able to be open with that, people kind of are more receptive to want to help you and more empathetic when it comes to like, if a mistake happens, it's like, okay, cool, I took accountability for it, this is what it is. And I could tell just even from these first few minutes of talking to you of why you've been able to move so quickly in your career, because I think that there's one thing about the talent, but then there's another thing about your mindset and your perspective and your outlook of stuff and how you kind of show up. And I can tell you have this like optimistic, positive outlook. And I think that things end up working out for people that kind of take that perspective on life. And so it's it's dope to kind of hear your journey and your perspective on things.
Yeah, I have been described as like sunshine and sunflowers and things of that nature, and
I can see.
I just think like, I don't know, I've just always had this, it's like crazy. I've had this like inner knowing that I would be successful. And I knew I was going to be an artist. And I didn't know what it was going to look like. And I didn't care that I didn't know. I just knew that it was my responsibility to honor the call. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you watch like Elizabeth Gilbert, but she was talking about like curiosity versus like fear.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about like curiosity being like this really, really soft voice that just like taps on your shoulder and is like, hey, are you gonna listen? And so I think like a lot of it is just like the constant like um yes to that, to that curiosity despite whatever is coming up for me, and understanding that by trying, I'm learning about myself and I'm like sharpening my sword each time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually started using this new phrase like whenever something is really difficult for me or I'm struggling, and I just start going, yes, yes, I'm getting stronger. Which is so like delusional, but I've been doing it a lot and it helps so much. Like something's not working, or like, you know, communication may be struggling, like at work or like whatever it may be in any area. I just go, I take a second, obviously, to honor the emotion, but after I'm like, yes, I'm getting
I love that.
stronger. Let's
I mean, what else? What else is there to look at it? Like, you know, are you gonna sit there and complain about it? What is that gonna do? You know, I think that that's so important. It's just your perspective and how you look at things and how you show up is it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from for you? Was that like, is that something that just was always in you? Is that, have your parents kind of instilled that in you? Did you have a, you know, sibling or older, you know, relative that kind of shaped that perspective, or is that something that was always just kind of naturally how you've been?
I have always had like a passion around like the understanding like the self. Um, I think what was also beautiful about the Rockets and having that internship is that it actually sent me into a dark place, which
Mhm.
sounds crazy because it's like so contradictory to this amazing experience. But in order for me to do that internship, I was living outside of my parents' house, and I was paying rent. I was going to school full time. Um, I was still working at this oil and gas company, but the minimum wage in Texas is like 7.25. And so I had to supplement that with like DoorDash. So I had like five things going on. No full-time employment, so no insurance, and I had no access to like mental health or like therapy.
Mhm.
And I had like a rock bottom moment where I just was like, I thought I was like having a heart attack. But it was not. It was a panic attack. And I like vowed after I had that experience to be like, when I get insurance, I am going to therapy. I'm going to do the work. And uh, my first like therapist was this Black woman, and she basically like shifted my trajectory, and helped me to kind of learn how to own my story, be conscious of the fact that we're constantly creating stories. You know, I think that it's so funny how like designers and marketing people are, we're storytellers, right? But we forget that we're doing that in our own life and in our own experiences, creating those stories and those narratives. So yeah, I think that's where it kind of started for me, is like when I began like my journey in therapy after finishing my internship.
Such a game changer.
Yeah.
It's just crazy because like I had no idea of this background in your story, you know, when I asked you to come on, but I'm very, very an advocate of therapy and the whole kind of story in your head. And we don't realize how much of this is affecting our lives and how much of this like repetitive thing that we have that's not even necessarily true. And we don't even know why we do the things that we do. And I think that what I've found, and it sounds like what has happened for you, is being able to redirect that story and get an outside perspective. I think for me, for therapy was like that outside perspective of, hey, you're doing this again, and then this is like connected to this, and you're like, oh damn, I didn't think about that. Oh, okay, let me think about how these things kind of connect and come together. And I think therapy is such a game changer.
Yeah, it is. And I advocate for it for everyone. And people will say like, "Oh, well, I go to Pilates, that's my therapy." And I'm like, "That's not therapy. It's not."
It's different.
It's
Yeah.
different, but I mean, I'm like, that's great. That's like a form of like regulation, but I really want to be a part of like this a wave of artists that understands that you don't have to be like the troubled creative to make great things. You don't have
Mm.
to like have this weight of like darkness that fuels your creativity. Like that there can be light that is probably even more powerful than that, that fuels your creativity. And so once I like tapped into that, I yeah, I feel like I've only gotten better each year, and with each opportunity and with each project, I learn more about myself and I heal. And that healing is like just again like sharpening that sword.
You hear a lot of that with like artists and what drives them
Hmm.
of like pain or stuff that they've been through. That so that's an interesting perspective. I never thought of it like that of switching it over to something that is positive versus like trying to whether prove something or express yourself through art and having these times. And so that's a very fascinating thing of how to look at it and frame it. That's really dope. I like that.
Yeah.
And so okay, so this is so okay, so the therapy kind of shifted your mindset and helps you kind of with perspective and all of that stuff. You moved very fast in your career to be able to get set up and everything that you've been able to do. And now I see kind of this, and I don't know if it's something new, maybe I just saw it, but it feels like the content creation and kind of documenting and storytelling what you've been doing is really dope to me. And I like how you've kind of shifted or communicated kind of how your day goes and how you kind of create and your mindset about that. What kind of sparked that and inspired that?
Well, um, I think I was like, this is something I always wanted to do. Like, I always wanted to, like, people are always asking me, like, what is it like to be a graphic designer? Like, what do you do for the Seahawks? Or what does that look like? And they're always really fascinated by it. And I wanted to create, but there was just this, like, um, this procrastination that kept coming up, and I still haven't gotten like understood like exactly what was coming, where that started, because procrastination is usually a symptom, not the cause. But
Mhm.
something just like ignited in me on January 1st of 2024. um I can't even describe it, but it's like this mentality that I've kind of shifted into. um like just like studying some of my favorite athletes and just seeing that. I love One thing I love about sports is like seeing the way that some of the best, like when we think about Jordan, when we think about Kobe, and like when I watch like the different like documentaries about them, like how they were so dedicated. And I was like, I feel like that, but I want to, how can I apply that in my career? And um what that looked like for me this year is visibility and allowing myself
Mhm.
to be seen. So basically that's what inspired it, is like people were saying, hey, we'd love to see this, and I was like, okay, they want to see it, but do I want to show it? And then I was like, you know what, I want to be like Michael Jordan. So I'm going to be visible, and I'm going to craft like my personal brand, and like, really water this area of my life.
It's dope. I like it. I think the storytelling of it is really cool of just like how you came up. You posted something of like how you came up with the design. I think it was with Kawhi.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the
Yeah.
Kawhi design that you were talking about, how you came up with it and how you layered it and stuff like that. It's really cool because you always see these end graphics and end design of stuff, and you don't see a lot of people that I've seen, like artists, really explaining their process of how they've done stuff. So I think that that's what stood out to me and was unique about like, oh, this is the take of it and how you kind of connected the dots and put it all together.
Yeah, I it's also cool for me. It's like a good practice to keep in mind, because sometimes like when you're creating something, like it's just this like flow of energy, and you may not, even though the decisions are intentional, you're not like articulating them in your brain, I guess. Like when I'm choosing one color over another, or like in that particular design, like how I wanted to create two different stories within a graphic. Like at the time when I was making that, I think that was more of like subconscious. So
Mm-hmm.
it's also a cool practice for me, and I think a good practice for creators to kind of, learn how to really express their design choices. So it's really cool, and I'm enjoying doing it, and I'm hoping that it inspires some artists to, if she can do it, like I could try this.
So
Yeah.
yeah, my dad and I were talking this morning because he's a musician, and he was talking about how when you start doing something, especially in the creative space, for so long, or just in whatever, you start doing these things second nature, and you don't even know why or how you're doing it. You're just kind of picking up on it because you've done it for so long.
Right.
So the process, like you said, to articulate, okay, this is why I've done this. It kind of you can see the flow of thinking too, and like the patterns of stuff. I think that's a really cool way of documenting and being able to visualize it.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're like an athlete, or like I'm thinking of like in boxing, it's so quick when
Mm-hmm.
they're like making these really quick decisions. And maybe in the moment they're not so like consciously deciding to do certain things because they've been practicing it for so long. But then when you go back and show them the tape, they're like, oh yeah, no, I knew that was my opening. So yeah, I kind of think
That's dope.
about it in that sense.
I love it. What do you do when you, because this is something I'm always interested with creatives of, like, when you hit those blocks, right? When things are just not flowing, right? Like the creative juices are just on pause. What do you do in those times to kind of get into the state of, you know, creativity?
I think so. I'm trying to like now instead of react to those situations is like be more proactive about not being there in the first place, because I discovered for myself that whenever I have projects like that where I'm really stumped and I'm just not like everything that I'm throwing at the board is just not working, is that there's like some level of inauthenticity happening, or there might be some sort of limiting belief that I'm carrying. And so I try to be proactive about that, about like really taking care of myself, being really clear when I start projects about what my why is, and like making sure I'm not. I call it like jail, like make sure I'm not putting myself in like design jail, like these like imaginary bars, like keeping me from creating the way that I want to. But when it does happen, I usually will literally take the time to like stop and like journal and figure out like what is actually causing it, because there's a time once where I was having that issue where I was like, oh, this is just not working. Like I've tried all these different styles and I've made like 3 different mood boards. It's just not coming together. Took a second, decided to just kind of breathe, and then I kind of wrote down like, what am I afraid of right now? Like, what is coming? Why is this happening? And so then when I actually like really break it down, um, it could be, yeah, like that fear of failure coming up, or that fear of maybe it's something I like a lot of times when I have to work on projects that are really close to my identity. Like, let's say I did something for like Black History, maybe I'm like putting too much pressure on myself on like how I represent it, because I feel like it's personal to me. So yeah, I just like take the time to really understand like what is restricting me, because it's all here, and I know that I can make, if we're starting from the belief that like everything that I make is fire and I don't have the capacity to make bad work, how do you create then? So if that's not the
Right.
place that I'm operating from, then I need to figure out where it is, because it's causing a block.
That's crazy. I never thought of it like that. Because you're right. When you do bring it back, you're like, well, why do I feel like this? And you're like, because I just don't want to get it done. But why?
Yeah.
Because I'm this, and then you just keep like peeling back the layers of that stuff. But I didn't think about it from a sense of procrastination, which that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's the same thing. There's some resistance coming up,
Mm-hmm.
something you're dealing with,
Yeah.
and then pulling it back. That's I like that perspective.
Right. And I think like what I've been learning about myself a lot this year, or last year in particular, like that our bodies and our minds are all like communicating things to us. Which might sound a little woo woo, but it's like just, I feel like it's just science. Like, if creative block is happening for you, like that is your brain communicating to you that there is an issue. So address it and don't try to power through it, because like pushing harder in the wrong direction is not going to get you to your destination faster. So it's more about like being able to pivot and recognize when it's happening, and then identifying where it's coming from, because inspiration is all around you, but you can't see it if there's something like, I like to call it like a veil. There's like a veil over your eyes.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I love it. I really appreciate this. Appreciated this conversation and just kind of your perspective. You are going to go and accomplish some amazing things. I could just tell from your perspective, your outlook, and your talent. All of that combined is what is going to make this a incredible journey. And so I'm excited to watch this grow and evolve. And so 2024, you said visibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's next for you? What's the plan for this year for that visibility? Is it just content creation? What does that look like for you? Because I know you already have it mapped out and ready to go.
A little bit. I think what I'm trying to like tap into like this almost there was like a creative innocence to the way that I was making album art before I ever got my opportunity with the Rockets. And I think that when I was creating from a place of doing art for art's sake, um, that was when I found success, when I wasn't attached to a particular outcome. I'm not attached to any outcomes in the way that I'm creating right now. I'm like open to what uh, can come as a result of me honoring this goal that I have to make myself visible, to honor my visibility. So yeah, but ideally, I would love to have some really cool opportunities this year, and cool projects that kind of expand my like creative sword and give me some opportunities to do some like cool stuff in the realm of sports and media and entertainment. I want to encourage and start to kind of become a resource for artists that are just starting out, or especially artists of color who are struggling with that authenticity piece, having been in a corporate space. And then I also, I'm a Christian, so I kind of want to redefine like what, as someone who believes in a creator, like how does that translate into the life of an artist? So those are my hopes, but we'll see.
That's dope. I love it. Well, I know you're gonna accomplish it. Do you do freelance stuff and projects on the side as well?
Yes, I'm open for freelance.
Awesome. So where can people? I'm gonna link it in the show notes and everything like that. But where can people find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me at donnypsd@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Donny Brock underscore PSD, and on TikTok at Donny underscore PSD to see more of my day in the life, how I create, my philosophy around creativity, and just my connection to being a creator and serving a creator.
I love it. That's a bar.
I mean,
Well,
I be spending from now and then,
that's dope. Well, I appreciate the conversation. This was really dope, and I'm excited to again watch your journey, and hopefully we'll have you back on for a part 2 to talk about these big things that you're accomplishing.
Yes, can't wait. We will.